Welcome in. You're listening to the Hail Yeah podcast presented by Garage Bar Sports. I'm John Eastep with my co-host and business partner, Jared Helmick. Jared, how's it going? Are you ready to do our
Yeah.
first long-form podcast?
Yeah, we've been doing these short clips as we've kind of walked through the season to start off, and it's about time. We need to lengthen this out a little bit for those who have more than a 6-minute commute. So I think we're due here.
Yeah, agree. I mean, as some of you maybe have seen, we've slowly gained a few more followers. As Jared alluded, we've had some clips out there on the various social media platforms with keys to the game and commenting on various Big 12 comings and goings. But we want to include as part of our regular presentation eventually a bi-weekly long form podcast that ideally would record Sunday following Big 12 football games during football season, and then basketball games during basketball season, and then another midweek kind of long form podcast that you can listen to, and we'll have commentary related to West Virginia. Certainly will be our focus, but the Big 12 in general, and then some days we'll get into broader college sports topics. Why don't we do that, Jared? Do you want to give just a little rundown of what this podcast will be, who the audience is we're looking to kind of capture, and what people can expect from us going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is certainly not just exclusive to West Virginia athletics, although that's primarily where that's where we're based. That's who we followed. But as
we're
a
fans.
fan,
We're fans. Yep.
I always say this is from the fans for the fans. So yeah, as I look at it, just if I were a Big 12 fan, I'd be curious about West Virginia, and I'd be curious about other teams around the conference, particularly at a time when there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest from various fan bases now because we've got 4 new schools coming in that have come in this year, and then we've got four more coming in next year from out west.
Yep.
So that I like that, but just to elaborate on what John's describing, is I look at this as an opportunity to gain some listeners across the country from the Big 12 landscape, and we're certainly not going to just be limited to athletes. For WVU, we have some contacts out there that I think would certainly be willing to come on the show and talk. And so it could be former players, it could be support staff at other universities, so could be coaches, administration. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. We've talked a lot about this over the years, and we've been on radio for it's been years, but we've done this a time or two. So I think that we've got a good opportunity to bring some Mountaineer football and Big 12 athletics to the listener audience.
Yeah,
and I say football because it's football season, but as you mentioned, basketball, baseball, major sport programs or athletes that are in Olympic sports that are thriving in their respective sport.
Yeah, agree. And to put a finer point on that, I mean, and you alluded to this, one of the things we'd like to do is bring athletes on the program. We would, I know both you and I, Jarrett, listen to sports podcasts, and one of the things that is most interesting to me is rather than just listen to the host stumble and bumble around, when they have interesting guests on, that can be really entertaining, particularly if it's somebody that's in the news or somebody that's has had an awesome game the week before or whatever it may be. We would love to be able to bring those interviews to you. So ultimately, once we grow this, our hope is that we're able to do some of that and bring some some really interesting interviews to you. And in the meantime, until we ramp up and are positioned to do that and grow the audience, we'll hopefully bring you some really interesting and maybe sometimes funny sports commentary related to the Big 12 and college sports in general. So hope you listen. Right now, I know the college sports landscape, Jarrett, you and I have talked about this, is like totally saturated with people, and it's not a huge expense. A lot of people can grab a mic and have a podcast. So we want to try to eventually differentiate ourselves. And we know that people have some go-to podcasts that they listen to. Certainly you and I do. But we'd like to at the start, hopefully people start to like us and listen and make us part of their weekly routine and listen to the podcast as they're going into work. You mentioned that, or doing their errand or driving around town. And that's something that hopefully we'll be able to grow to. So thanks for those handful of you that are listening to this. Thanks for tuning in to our first episode 1.
Yeah, and from a football perspective, some of the key things that we're going to cover every week are we're going to cover the bets that we like within the Big 12. So that could be a player prop bet. That could be we'll make our picks for each game. And so far this season, we've actually done pretty well.
What's our record? Do you have the record? What's our record?
I need to go through and do that, an updated standing for the entire season.
But I was in the lead, right?
No, I haven't got back. Yeah, you were certainly in the lead, and it's not for my poor choosing. It's just you've been on fire. So hopefully we can keep that up. But
unfortunately, I was locked out of my draft. As games. You know, I was locked out of my DraftKings account, so I wasn't. Yeah, the E-Step family was not getting any richer as a result of because I wasn't actually making any formal bets.
That'll slow your
but I was unlocked. I was unlocked last weekend, so now I'm sure when I start betting, and then I promptly lost $100 on the same game last week, 2 different bets. So I mentioned this to you, and I'll just mention it briefly while we're on gambling. So I placed a $50 bet on. It was a mid-game bet. I turned on the game midway, I think through the first quarter. Kansas State at Oklahoma State last Friday. Kansas State, I'm sure, was favored. I don't know what the original line was pre-game or what the closing line was just before kickoff, but I would have taken Kansas State every day of the week, twice on Sunday, because Oklahoma State's been terrible. Their program is reeling, at least from all external, from that external perspective. People are really getting on Gundy. They got just completely destroyed by Georgia Southern, South Alabama, who Gundy starts talking about after the game, how he tells everybody that they're like a legit Power 5 team. And what happens? Like Georgia, what are they? I don't even know what South Alabama's record is, but they've now lost like 2 out of the 3.
They're South Alabama.
Well, yeah, but they've lost games. They've lost games to terrible teams, and it's like Gundy made them out to be like a Big 12 caliber team, and his team got waxed. And they go up to Iowa State and they lose to an improving Iowa State team and an improving quarterback situation there in particular, which we'll handle on a podcast, I'm sure, with Anthony Beck's son up there. But I think, all indications were Iowa State was going to get walloped. Kansas State has underperformed a little relative to their preseason expectation, defending Big 12 champs, and they're down like 7 or 10 points when I turn on the game, and I'm thinking, this isn't good, but I haven't placed a bet yet. So I'm not stuck with whatever the line. And the line then, they're down like 7 or 10. Maybe they're down 7. OK State's driving. The line's like -1.5 K-State. So I'm like, okay, I'm going all in on that $50 bet. K-State will get this turned around. I hadn't seen anything to that point, but I'm like, this is a fluke. K-State's going to be fine. Next thing I know, like OK State just takes the lead out to like 20 points.
John.
Did you watch
South Alabama? No. I mean, it's just like you said, Oklahoma State. Why? I don't want to watch them right now. They are like this reeling program where players are transferring out.
Well, you made a comment about their crowd.
3-2, so it may. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit here, but South Alabama. They're off to a rousing 3-3 start with losses to Central Michigan.
Yeah.
And
like Liberty or something?
James Madison.
James Madison.
are a couple of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
yeah,
JMU is a good program.
not exactly Power 5.
No,
I mean,
not
give me a
hardly,
break here.
hardly. And you made a comment about OK State's crowd. I think when you did like flip by
Yeah.
on Friday,
What has happened?
Yeah, and they're playing K-State. I guess it was a Friday night, so maybe that threw things off a little bit. But just to complete this idiotic move by me on Friday,
You're better than that.
like
Better than that.
So then I'm like, shit, OK State is walloping them. Like K-State doesn't look like they're in the game. OK State's going up and down the field. K-State can't do anything on offense. K-State's quarterback, who is it? Howard. Looked like a statue back there, was throwing terrible balls, picks left and right.
I don't know.
So I'm like, this is going poorly. OK State goes up like 20 points. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to put money. I'm going to hedge. I'm going to put money on OK State, and the line then was like 12.5. So the line was predicting, Vegas was predicting Kansas State was going to come back. But I thought, OK State's rolling with it. Or I'm sorry, OK State's rolling with it. The Cowboys are going to keep the lead. And so I put $50 on OK State. What happens? OK State does win. K-State gets closer, closes it to within like 8 or whatever the final score was. I lose both ends of the bet. So to my point at the beginning of this long-winded story, I need to stop betting is the end of the story.
Yeah, and I would stress this is simply for entertainment purposes only.
Yes.
As we don't.
My God, if you take my advice, you're gonna go bankrupt. So don't. And if you need help, call 1-800-GAMBLING or whatever the number is.
Yeah. I mean,
and only gamble in states that are legal.
And we've followed this enough to where you would think we've got some pretty decent insight. So by following primarily 14 teams, you kind of know the players, the coaches, systems, schemes. I mean, all that. So yeah, welcome, and let's go along for the ride here. So why don't we kick it off here with some of the key points that we've kind of discussed as we've opened up with WVU in Houston. Right now, the current spread is 3, which we'll go through each of the 5 Big 12 games for this weekend. But from a standpoint of the Mountaineers and Houston, 7:00 on Thursday on FS1. John, give me a key point that you're looking for in this game that's a really important one for the Mountaineers, as they're one of 2 undefeated teams atop the conference standings right now. They're in second place at 2-0. Houston is desperate. They are desperate for a win. This would be their first ever Big 12 victory if they can pull it off. So 3-point spread. All indications are this is a close game. So give me a key point.
Yeah, so these I'll give you a couple of key points. So I think this game, and I'll let you're kind of the stats guy, and I know you're familiar with kind of where some of the Houston position groups rank relative to the other Big 12 teams. But I think, at gut feel, having watched Houston a couple of times, watched West Virginia, I think this is a favorable setup for West Virginia. I think, and I mentioned this in one of our short clips that's going to go out to social media. I think that one of the keys to the game is the fact that West Virginia is coming off a bye week. And sometimes that can be, it can cut both ways. You can come off, you can be playing really well. You can hit the bye week. Things can get sideways on you. You can lose your mojo, and then all of a sudden you come back and forget what you're doing. Or you can hit the bye week at a needed time, rejuvenate, reset, do what you need to do in the bye week to prepare yourself for the next week. And I fully expect that West Virginia is going to fall into the latter category for a couple of reasons. One is they don't really have any mojo to begin with. I say that in a, the most positive way possible. Absolutely, we have an identity this year, which venture to say it may be the first time in the Neal Brown era that we do.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, John, because I was just going to go there. Have we had an identity under Neal Brown? And I mean, we played some killer D early
Certainly
in
not
this
offensively.
time to
Yeah.
upset some teams, but offensively, yeah, I'm with you.
I
I
think,
like that.
yeah, I think offensively we haven't, and we do now. We're a running football team, and they said this at the the
Yep.
coaches said this at the press conference, but everybody knew it. Running football team, tough offensive line. We get behind them, we'll play physical, we'll block, and we'll throw when we need to. And I think West Virginia's done a great job of that. And when you do that, though, that can be a really taxing style of play on offense. And so being able um, to get a break after your first 5 games and rest people up. CJ Donaldson looked horrendous last week. I'm sure the kid was trying, but he could have easily scored on the 3rd down play down around the goal line when West Virginia got held. Maybe the 4th down play looked like he was running so tentatively or was just exhausted, whatever the case may be, that I think this rest will do him and his teammates good. So I fully expect.
I'm looking forward to him bouncing back. I mean,
And we need
as
him.
we've discussed,
We need
we
him.
both love him.
Yeah.
We need him
Yeah.
bad. He's a load to pull down.
Yeah, totally. So I think we need him. I think coming off the bye is going to help us. I don't think there's any mojo to lose. I think we're just going to put our nose to the grindstone and get back at it. And I look for us to play well. And I'm happy if you want to run us through. If you're interested in run us through some of the what you think some of the key matchups are, like position group versus position group. We can do that. But I just feel good about this game. I know we're 3-point favorites. Neal, we have traditionally not played well on the road under Neal, but last game out, you won at TCU, where I know we've had some success, but West Virginia, really overcame a lot of adversity in that game. And I think maybe starting to learn how to win on the road a little bit. They won at OK State at the end of last year. Now won 6 of their last 8 games under Brown. I don't know if you had heard that stat, Jarrett, but 6 out of 8 is not bad going back to last year.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, where do you think Houston can be? What do you think their weak spots are? Where do you think West Virginia is going to be able to target them and has an advantage?
I really think this, as I looked at it, I think I'm shocked that the line's only 3. I know that West Virginia we have the tendency to just slow the game down, chew clock, so games are close. But just simply from a statistical perspective, man, a lot of the key matchups as I was going through it really favor the Mountaineers. So, for instance, sacks against Houston is currently 11th in the conference. So far, they have played 2 Power 5 teams. That's it. And the 2 Power 5 teams have been TCU and Texas Tech. Both teams that West Virginia did what? Beat. So, okay. How did they perform?
And Dana mentioned that, by the way, at his press conference this week. He pointed that out. I mean, he's well aware. The 2 people we lost to are the 2 people West Virginia's played and defeated.
Interesting the way that worked out. So the first was TCU in Houston, and TCU wins by 23 in front of 36,000 fans. So then Texas Tech, they go on the road to Lubbock, hang in there some in the first half, ends up being a 21-point win for the Red Raiders. So just simply based upon schedule, meanwhile, the Mountaineers have faced 4 Power 5 programs to start the season, including going on the road to Penn State, who's one of the most talented teams in the entire country. So then you take a look at it and you say, okay, in only 5 games, West Virginia has sacked the quarterback 12 times, which is 11th in the conference. Some of that's simply due to the fact that there's been fewer games, fewer opportunities to do so. So I just think from a offensive line versus defensive line on both sides of the ball, West Virginia, that has been the strength of this team. And to further that, we've been able to run the football and control the clock. And you remember when Dana was here, in Morgantown. Dana's last thing on his mind ever is time of possession. Unless maybe the season with Skylar Howard, when we had a number of defensive superstars that ended up going into the NFL, and many of them still play to this day off of that defense, when we ended up playing Miami and Orlando in the Champ Sports Bowl, I think it was. But yeah, I just think there's certainly some key opportunity in the trenches, and I think that's where you really can see a team have consistency. It reminds me of the saying in basketball where defense travels, and offensive and defensive line play will always travel with you. And I think for that reason, that's why the Mountaineers have been able to come up with a couple big wins early in the Big 12 conference season.
That's a good point. So I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. The style of play that we are playing this year really does lend itself to being able to go on the road. So we've got to put our money where our mouth is, but I think that there you may be onto something there. I will say a couple of things that I thought of. So one is I wonder. So I've always, since Neal started, and this offense, he can do it now. But this offense is not that dissimilar than what he tried to do his first season, a little bit his second season. We didn't have great quarterbacks. We tried to run the ball, and even if we weren't able to run the ball, we tried to play keep away, basically, from the defense. And my concern is, and maybe now, the Big 12 in general is becoming more physical. West Virginia is not the only brand that's doing that now. But are you going to be able to sustain a level? I mean, it's working for us. Now we're underdogs in a lot of ways coming into the season. Could you be more of an underdog? You're picked 14th coming into the season.
14th out of 14.
Yeah. So but the question that I have is, does it work for you? And maybe we'll shift. Maybe we get some receivers in here and we'll shift. And maybe Neal will be able to do that. But there is some part of me that thinks I don't like to play. We're not Alabama. Right. So I don't want to Alabama you, because you may end up in games, and maybe this will be an example Thursday, knock on wood, but where you end up in games against people you're more talented than, and you keep them in the game because you're holding the ball, and you end up with, 7 possessions or whatever.
Yep.
So I think that's a
Syracuse playing a 2-3 zone D in basketball is what it reminds me of. It's just your system, Army-Navy approach. Like, it's just a different philosophy. And Neal's won with that. That is right up his alley. That's how he's beaten some of these teams on the road prior to him coming to West Virginia. You go on the road in Lincoln, Nebraska. You go on the road to Baton Rouge and win with Troy.
Yeah.
Troy.
Yeah. And we'll see. I guess it will be a good problem to have if the premise of my question is really, once we're successful and have better athletes, will we continue to do this and potentially lose to teams that are not as good as us? But I guess we don't have to worry about that right now. So, okay, let's strike that and move on.
We're playing to our strengths.
We're playing to our strengths. That's fair. So I don't think it's really fair. It's not really a fair criticism at this point. So the second thing that I thought of, and I hadn't thought much of this until I was aware of it, and then you mentioned it. But the fact that West Virginia and Texas Tech have played the same 2 Big 12 opponents, what does that do for either? Is it a total wash? I mean, they're getting to see us play their opponents. We're getting to see them. Certainly, you're getting more information. Certainly you're getting more information than you ordinarily would, because you are getting to see their individual players.
Yeah,
against
how they react,
individual players for TCU, or Texas Tech. You're getting to see how Houston's offensive linemen handled, the defensive linemen of TCU, who we know Zach Frazier went against, and then he goes against our D linemen in practice. And so maybe that gives us a little more insight into how Houston's center is going to play, for example, and where so you may be able to really pick some holes that way. I guess the thing is, both coaching staffs are going to have that available to them. Both coaching staffs have the same time to prepare. I will say, if I had to put money on a coaching staff that's probably more diligent, it might be ours as opposed to Dana's, which seems a little bit more free flowing and kind of maybe a little bit less detail oriented. But Dana, I will say,
Free spirited.
But Dana, when he's not sleeping, can call some good plays, and he knows players and he knows the Big 12. And so they've got smart coaches over there too. So I think I would venture to say, I'd be interested if you have a different view, but I would say it's probably a wash. But it's not, I think ultimately it would just roll. The team that's going to have an advantage from that is the same team that would have an advantage if you didn't play the same teams, right? It's a team that's able to scheme and able to scout video and is going to do a better job scheming up plays offensively, defensively, and on special teams to match up the best they can with the other team. So maybe it's not here or there, but it really is an interesting. You're going to have so much more information going into the game.
And that's a lot of, we'll say, extracurricular type stuff. So if I look back at just, we'll say statistics that I was starting to talk about. And I always say, one of my professors used to say this, is statistics never lie and liars use statistics. And so as you go through this statistical analysis of this game and you look at some of the key matchups, another one is the Houston defense, who has played 2 Power 5 teams, and they are giving up 163 yards per game on the ground. West Virginia rushes for almost 200 yards on the ground per game, and that's against 4 Power 5 programs. So, I mean, that's another key area to me is how can the running game continue to perform. And another one that I would focus on, which is it's personally a little bit of an exciting matchup because the guy played for West Virginia. So Houston has 4 players that originally went to West Virginia and have since transferred and followed Dana to Houston. So, and that's Sam Brown, one of them being him. And he was a highly recruited kid that Florida and Georgia were certainly interested in late in the recruiting process. Ends up coming to West Virginia, transfers early in his career. Didn't play a whole lot, but was a player that the coaches were really excited about. And he's averaging 6.8 catches per game, 103.6 yards per game. So he's over 100 yards, and he's leading the Big 12 conference in receiving. So they've got a stud on the outside. How does Beanie Bishop play against Sam Brown, who's also a transfer? One of the better transfers that we've gotten, right, John? I mean, he came in from Minnesota, was the type of player that traditionally the Mountaineers have struggled to be able to get and really hold on to in the portal recruiting. And Beanie, man, I'll go through some of his stats here, but what do you think? What are some of your early thoughts on that's a pivotal key to me?
Yeah, so in terms of those individual player matchups, I agree with you. I think our run game has an advantage. And we have the benefit. I'm interested now. You and I both listen, and we'll just give them some free advertising. Not that they need it, but listen to the 3 Guys Before the Game podcast with Tony and Brad and Hoppy, and they always do their preview, podcast early in the week. This one's a little bit earlier because the game's earlier, but I haven't had the benefit of listening to that, but that's good. So we're not borrowing other people's ideas. But I would venture to say when Brad does his stats presentation, that may be one key where West Virginia really has an advantage. I think is our running game and the defensive line and the rush defense of Houston. So I totally agree with you there. And then I think couldn't agree more on Beanie Bishop. I think he's been one of the most impactful transfers West Virginia has had in years, maybe the most impactful under Neal Brown. I'd have to
Huge.
think about it a little bit, but given what he's been able to do, looks like a total legit Big 12 corner out there, potentially somebody that could play himself into an opportunity to play at the next level. He looks really good. Yes, he could have caught a couple picks here or there. He dropped one at Penn State, dropped one at TCU. That would have been a pick six, but has looked fantastic. And more than just, well, in addition to, I mean, obviously his play during plays is key, and he just looks fantastic out there. But I think more than that is his maturity on the field. I mean, he looks like somebody that is in the game. He is totally focused. He doesn't get too high or low. He's a leader. And he looks great out there. And Garrett looks like a leader out there. And we have a number of leaders on the field, including some of those senior or more senior offensive linemen who have played a lot of football. And so I think that I just feel I like our roster right now a lot. I mean, I know we're really thin at receiver, and the receivers can play a whole heck of a lot better than they have. And I fully expect that they will starting this week. But I think, I really like the roster. I think this is a good matchup against Houston. I would be surprised if we come out flat. I do think if there is a potential, if West Virginia doesn't, take care of the football like it has been taking care of the football. But if you run into a situation where you have a couple turnovers, things could change on you really quickly. So I think we're just going to have to keep an eye on that. But looking forward to it. It's
just a couple quick follow-up points on Beanie. Beanie he's first in the Big 12 in passes defended. Go back to that Penn State game when we were both there, and we were a little bit concerned about Beanie at the time, where Penn State kind of, they're one of the most talented teams in the country, but and Beanie's really bounced back from that early season, and he truthfully, as we went back and watched it, wasn't far off on some of the misses. So it was more of Penn State's doing than Beanie being out of position. So he's first in passes defended in the Big 12. He's 20th in the Big 12 in tackles, which I could not believe. And that's we've got 5 games compared to some of these teams that have 6 games played. So I was impressed there. And then he's tied for 7th with 2 picks and has had plenty of other opportunities to make some of these picks. So why don't we go ahead?
Do you have the list in front of you? Can you tell how many corners are ahead of him in the top 20, or is that do you not have the full list?
Yeah,
I don't want to put you on the spot, but
yeah. So he's there's 6 ahead of him, so that he's tied for 7th. Actually, Houston has Malik Fleming. He's tied for 2nd, and then Jeremiah Cooper is leading the conference with 4 picks. Plays for Iowa State with 1 that he returned. So speaking of the conference, why don't we kind of go through some of the Big 12, all of the 5 Big 12 conference games that we've got coming up this weekend. And then we'll save the West Virginia game, I guess, for last. We'll make that pick as we typically do on our weekly YouTube podcast, but the short clips. I think going into this, before we make some of our picks, one of the most interesting things to me that as I looked at just basically these teams and where they fall in the standings, the newcomers are 1-8 in the conference, with BYU holding the lone win over the Cincinnati Bearcats in Provo. So that was staggering to me. I absolutely could not believe that any of the 4 newcomers have won a game against an existing Big 12 conference member. So, okay, John, why don't we prepare? I'll kick it back to you here. We've got 5 Big 12 games this weekend. It looks like Texas and Oklahoma, after the Red River rivalry, are off this weekend. So we'll start with the noon game. Iowa State goes on the road to Cincinnati Cincinnati is a 5-point favorite. That game is on FS1.
What time's the game? Do you know?
Noon.
Noon game. Noon game. So I think in that one, I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I think they have the better roster. I think they'll cover that spread. It's a home game. I know Iowa State has some momentum coming off the game that they played against OK State last week. If I'm not mistaken, Cincinnati's coming off of a bye week. Is that right? Do you know? I think they are. I don't believe they played last week.
You're right.
And so Cincinnati had an extra week to prepare. Iowa State had a tough home game. Rocco Becht, the quarterback we mentioned a couple of times, who is Anthony Becht's son, the former West Virginia great and NFL tight end, is playing much better. He's 5 foot nothing, 100 and nothing, and still looks pretty good.
So Rudy,
kid's Rudy. He's Rudy, but I don't think Becht is able to keep Cincinnati from covering in that one. Cincinnati has not met expectations this year. I expect that Cincinnati, subject to a couple of other of these games, and you'll have to give me the matchups, but Cincinnati could be the first of the newcomers if West Virginia takes care of business on Thursday to defeat an existing Big 12 team.
Yep.
And I would predict that they do so.
And they cover the spread?
Yes, I have them covering the spread. I think 5. Cincinnati wins by 10 plus.
Okay. Put it on the board.
Don't count that 10 plus when you're figuring up the win-loss record at the end of the weekend. I want to be clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying more than 5. More than 5.
Okay. So we've got Cincinnati -5. I'm all over that. Give me the Bearcats. Last week, so I think we know that Iowa State, they're a different team when they play in Jack Trice.
That's true.
I mean, in Ames, they are totally different. It's always that way. You get them at night, look out. Yep. We've watched countless teams go in there and just fumble the ball, throw it away. It's unbelievable, the difference in teams. So they're the Jekyll and Hyde of the Big 12 consistently, with them playing at home versus on the road. And not that that's overly uncommon, but it's just a difficult place to play.
Yep.
So last week, Iowa State, they end up with 4 picks, win the turnover battle 4-0 over the Horned Frogs. This week, that changes. Give me Cincinnati, I'll say by 2 touchdowns.
Wow.
In Nippert Stadium.
That could happen.
Yep. Okay, so then we go to...
Is this, by the way, part of your strategy to try to come back in the win-loss column? Is just to make... I guess that would be a poor strategy. If you're just picking everything I pick, and I guess we're only 1 in. We'll see what you do on the rest of these. We'll see what you do on the rest of these.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next one?
Okay, so then we go, Kansas goes on the road. And I think based on some of your comments earlier in this episode that I think I know where you're going here.
Okay.
But Kansas goes on the road to Oklahoma State and is a 3-point favorite at 3:30 on FS1. Yeah,
so I'll say the game last week really puts a wrench in things for me, because I would have said I guess you should answer this for me. Is Jalen Daniels going to play?
I mean, it's early in the week because we're doing this because the Mountaineers play on Thursday. I don't know if he's got a long term.
Let me see while we're doing
that. That is a really, really good question. So while you're looking that up, let me see here.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I think Bean has not done great for them. Lingering back.
Yeah, I don't know if he's gonna be back.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
absent from starting line. They play OK State, right? So let's see here. OK State, doubtful. Okay, so doubtful is the word. So unless that changes, I am actually, and this would be good for West Virginia, and I'm going to root like hell that it happens. That this may be the key game that I want to watch now this weekend. I'm going to take OK State.
This is a big one.
I'm going to take OK State to cover with the
I feel like Lee Corso just did all this build-up and then pulled out the headgear.
Yeah.
And it's like, boo.
Yeah. I should put on a cowboy hat. I got one around here somewhere. But in any event, OK State, I think, will cover the spread. And I hope this is I'm betting with my head and not my heart, because I think it would be good for West Virginia to get Kansas, who we don't play, another loss in Big 12 play, in addition to that Texas loss. But I think OK State will cover, and I think they might win with Bean playing for Kansas State and coming off of that really good game against K-State.
So the only ranked Big 12 member this week is Kansas that's playing
this week,
because we've got Texas and Oklahoma off.
Yep.
Kansas going on the road at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has some renewed hope here. I'll go Kansas to cover the spread by more than 3 in Stillwater.
All right. First point of demarcation.
And then we'll follow that one up. We go BYU goes on the road to Fort Worth, and the Horned Frogs are favored by 6 at 3:30 in the ESPN game. So that would be 2:30 local.
2:30 local?
2:30 local.
3:30?
The Horned Frogs.
So you said BYU, right?
Yeah, we've got Caden Slovis, the Pitt transfer. And Mountaineer fans are going to be fired up to see him.
Who are the commentators for this game? Do you know?
Comments.
Do you know? I'm trying to understand. So they're in the slot.
Are they playing? Does that make some type of is that a determining factor?
No, I've never
heard anybody take the best bets clear to who the commentators.
This is a distraction point. I'm trying to figure out who our commentator will be next Thursday at 3:30 on ESPN, which I'm hoping is Sean McDonough. So I thought,
he would be the go-to.
So I thought maybe if McDonough
has the night game now.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. In any event, I think TCU has to. They're going to be motivated. They're coming back home. I think they have too much talent at the skill positions, and I do think that their running back is just supremely talented, and so they need to get in the ball. But I think I'm going to take TCU to cover and win the game. Cover the points, and I will get a little bit. Have we heard what Chandler Morris is doing? So he went out SMU.
Yeah, he did.
I guess that's one thing I'm going to check on.
He's been hot. He's quick.
Yeah, he's really quick. He's like as quick or seemingly as Garrett Green. He's really quick. He reminds me a lot of Garrett Green, actually, when we played them. So Chandler Morris playing BYU. Let's see what the Google machine.
And keep in mind, BYU gets an extra week to prepare.
Oh, okay. So that's to our other point. So it looks like Morris is not going to play. Well, hum-de-dum-dum. Josh Hoover will start. It's being reported by S. Johnson. Steven Johnson, a winning reporter and TCU beat writer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. So you have the word on the street is no starting quarterback. I'm not going to change my bet. I still think TCU has more talent, more depth, and they'll pound the rock, and they will beat BYU by more than, what'd you say it was, 3?
6.
6. I think they beat them by more than 6.
Okay, so John goes with the commentators and the Horned Frogs. I'm going to go with the BYU Cougars.
Okay.
They are going to go on the road and stay within 6 with Caden Slovis, the former USC and Pitt quarterback.
Slovis is horrendous, but okay. Good luck to
Well,
you.
in the first half against Cincinnati, they looked absolutely horrid. And they ended up scoring 35 points in that game. I was like, man, this is just painful to watch at first. But I think the benefit of going against a backup quarterback, the benefit of also having extra time to prepare, I think those are the determining factors to where I say, okay, I'm in on the Cougars here to have a newcomer to the Big 12 victory. Although I guess I don't even need to pick them straight up like that. I just need them to stay within 6. Okay, so then we've got Kansas State. The Wildcats with Will Howard are going on the road into Lubbock with, is it Brooks, the high-flying running back, who's been quite impressive. So who do you got? We've got a night game. Night games in Lubbock are never easy. It's an FS1 game, John. We've got Texas Tech 1.5 favored over Kansas State, the defending Big 12 champions.
Yeah, I do think this is a tough matchup for K-State. I like Texas Tech at home in general. They play well at home. But I just don't – I think from a programmatic health perspective, I know Texas Tech got back on track last week. Was it last week they played? Who did they play last week? Were they off?
Texas Tech?
Yeah.
They won at Baylor, 39-14.
Oh, they won at Baylor. Yeah, they played really well. That's right. I was thinking back to the Houston game, which they kind of got back on track there. You know what? I'm going to take Texas Tech. I was going to say Kansas State could do it and would rebound. But I think that puts them in a really tough spot on the road at night there. I think Texas Tech would beat probably almost any Big 12 team coming off those 2 wins. They seem to have gotten it rolling at home, aside from maybe Texas or Oklahoma. I would include West Virginia in that. Got a great home field advantage. Let's go with Texas Tech this week to cover, to win the game against Kansas State.
Yeah, this is the one I'm a little bit – you're not going to see me throwing any money down on this one, that's for sure. Yeah, Texas Tech, I'm going to take them as well. 1.5 spread. This one we saw earlier in the season, Texas Tech really play Oregon tough. And I like Texas Tech to cover that 1.5 point spread over the Wildcats. Okay, so all that leads us to the Thursday night FS1 matchup, 7 o'clock against Houston. WVU at Houston in a I'm sure it'll be an interesting atmosphere. There were 36,000 fans there against TCU. Obviously, TCU is going to bring some fans to Houston based on proximity. But John, give me your thoughts on the Mountaineers or we'll say it differently, Neal Brown on the road at former coach Dana Holgorsen.
Yeah, so I think this one is not. I would give it a low confidence interval. I don't think, coming off of a bye, traditionally bad against on the road, and Neal Brown, at least at West Virginia, going against a former coach who's going to be riled up to play, a team that has their backs against the wall, hasn't really been competitive in Big 12 play so far. It's going to be a dead crowd, I think. For the most part, seats are selling for $1, I saw.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of funky things about this game that make it difficult because the arrows are pointing kind of in different directions. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think you roll the dice and more times than not, more likely than not, by a preponderance of the evidence, I think West Virginia will cover, and that would be the most likely outcome. I think this could go the other way. It wouldn't surprise me if West Virginia comes out and lays an egg. I think we have some solid matchups, but because it's a road that scares me a little bit. But I'm going to take West Virginia, and I'm going to take the points. And it wouldn't surprise me if we win in the 10 to 14 point range on the road Thursday night.
Yep, I was going 10-point West Virginia win. I think the ability to control the clock. Garrett Green is also back. We saw him against the Horned Frogs. He played well last week, picking up a big road victory after missing a couple games prior. So I do think that, just statistically, I just think this falls in the direction of the Mountaineers. It just comes down to can Houston play fiery enough? You've got those 4 former players, but that's only 4 players, and that were Mountaineers. So,
and other than Sam Brown, they're not all that scary. I mean, they're former Mountaineers.
Yeah,
I respect them. I liked them when they were here, but O'Loughlin's an old man, and our fourth best running back is their starter. So,
Tony Mathis,
yeah,
and Guzman, who played, basically due to injury at times here. So
what does he play? Did he start for them? Do you know?
Safety. I don't know how often he's playing for them. But yeah, I like the Mountaineers to win by 10 in this one. I think the offense, the ability to run the football and keep the football away from the fighting Red Bull Dana Holgersens. And I think the Mountaineers prevail.
I like it. So we were agreed on 3 out of 5, right? The 2 we didn't.
The 2 we didn't. We went
State,
to Kansas. Mm-hmm.
And what's the other one?
And then BYU, TCU.
Interesting. Okay.
So
we'll see. It would be good for West Virginia if OK State wins and Texas Tech wins. Those would be really big wins for us in the conference standings, having already defeated Tech and having OK State the following week with a little momentum and national TV matchup. So that would be exciting. Hopefully that all falls into place. I mean, I'm as optimistic about West Virginia football as I've been in a long time. So it's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, it's exciting. We've got a lot to talk about with 14 teams in the league now, and this is something that we'll enjoy, and we have a lot to look forward to with it. So yeah, those are the matchups. We talked a lot about the matchup of the Mountaineers and the Houston Cougars. We went through the 5 conference games that are taking place in the Big 12 this weekend. Or beginning on Thursday, I guess, and then leading into the 4 games on Saturday. So going to be an interesting week. Any final thoughts, John, before we put the cap on this episode?
Yeah, no, just I think it's going to be an interesting week of college football. Another good weekend in the Big 12. Looking forward to it. And hope everyone enjoys their weekend, has a safe weekend, and enjoys watching some Big 12 football. Thanks for listening in. If you're listening to this now, we've already been able to kind of pull you under the tent. You're one of our first listeners. So if you enjoyed what you heard, please spread the word, like and follow our social media, share the word with others that we exist, and we would be grateful for that. And we promise that it will get better. We'll eventually be a well-oiled machine, but we're just starting off. But we hope there's enough there that'll keep you coming back. So thanks for listening.
So this has been the Hell Yeah Podcast presented by Garage Bar Sports. Episode 1.
Numero uno.
Season 1.
See you next time.